about halfway through our allotted 2 hours. Want to provide you an opportunity now to ask questions of one another. Feel free to include some context, but please do get to a question, and then please do let the other person respond. And we ask that folks limit their responses to roughly 30 seconds. Trinidad Rodriguez, a question you have for anyone else up here?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mike Johnston. Your plan calls for these tiny home villages. We had, certainly some experience with this when we had low-income housing projects. And how many are you proposing to site in Denver, and where are you going to put them to address the 1,500 people that you claim these facilities will serve?
Yeah.
How many and where?
Yeah.
Specifically?
Yeah. So I think there are 1,400 units is the target that we would want to build. I've said that's probably 10 to 20 micro communities. Those include two options. Some of those could be tiny home villages. Some of them can be hotel conversions. Hotel conversions are larger and can do higher volume, but you want to do some combination of the two. And I think this is where we have the false choice. The false choice is either we have to leave people in encampments and can do nothing, or we have to wait to be able to build everyone single-family homes, and that can't get to the scale of 1,400 units. And so,
and that wasn't the question. You didn't answer the question.
I'm answering the question. So your question is, where would those be sited?
Yeah.
So the option is we have, as Leslie was referring, there are vacant lots all around the city that the city and county of Denver owns. We would find places that are close to public transit, that are not in dense residential neighborhoods, but they're in places that are a combination of commercial and transit connected. And the benefit of bringing services to these communities is it doesn't mean that they have to have direct access to downtown all the time. So included services means there's more flexibility on where they could be sited.
So I'd like the record to reflect he did not answer the question.
Lisa Calderon, your question for someone
I did
else
answer it.
No, you didn't.
Y'all are done.
Where are they going to go?
Now. You guys are done.
Mike?
Lisa Calderon,
where are you going to put
question?
Do you want me to answer that or not?
No, y'all are done. Okay. Lisa Calderon.
Please.
Yes, I have a question for Kelly Brough. So you and I and a few of us others turned in our tax returns, and your reported income when you were at the chamber was about $500,000 a year. You are also a top person who's getting campaign donations from the real estate corporations, developers. How can Denver voters actually believe that you can relate to their everyday struggles when you are so closely in bed with the same people who got us into this unaffordable housing mess?
Yeah, I am lucky, the kind of money I got to make at the chamber. I'll acknowledge that. But let's start with, you can't, I'm part of the Fair Elections Fund. You cannot accept money from corporations, developers, and I will be the top fundraiser for Denver residents giving in the Fair Elections Fund. So I actually think I have much more of a grassroots commitment to my campaign than probably anybody on this stage expected, and I'm extremely proud of it. But I would also say the reality is the next mayor needs to bring together our community in ways we never have, frankly. And I think this is where the employees of whether they work in the private sector or employees work in the nonprofit sector or employees who work in the public sector who've given to my campaign, I think what they could expect from me as mayor is the same kind of coming together to address the issues, finding solutions that make sense from multiple perspectives and diverse backgrounds.
Thank you.
And that's exactly how I'd work.
Thank you.
You denounced nearly
Just
$2 million in dark money that's going towards your campaign.
One question apiece. Thomas Wolf, you have the next question.
Yeah, first I'd like to apologize that I haven't begged for money every 13 seconds from Denver. I set a budget to go pretty much technology-wise, see if my message would resonate, and I'm answering to voters. There's a question in here.
Yep.
The one side of it is in the dark money that you can see that there's coastal billionaires that are funding a lot of the independent expenditures for, I guess I go to Mike, why should those people have sway or, why are they in this election?
Yeah, I think I don't have people funding that entity that have interest before the city. So I'm not looking at people that have complicit or vested interest there. I think I obviously have nothing to do with that entity, so I don't raise for it. I don't know who gives to it. But I think what I've seen is those are people who have a vision for, they want to see politics that works. They want to see a city that's going to be able to deliver results on hard problems. Can Denver be a city that builds a proof point for the country on what we can do on homelessness, on what we can do on affordable housing, on what we can do on public safety? And so I've been working hard to build resources for my own campaign directly that have come from people all across the city, and we're proud of that support.
Just to clarify, you said you don't know who gives to it?
Yeah, it's only when it's publicly reported.
Okay, so you do know who gives, because we all know who gave.
Yeah, only when it's publicly reported.
Okay.
Reid Hoffman, Mike Bloomberg.
Yeah, the names that are publicly reported. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Chris Hansen, question for somebody else.
Yeah, I'm going to stay on this topic, actually, because I think this is super important. So, again, for Mike, you've run for office 3 times in the last 5 years. Each time you've run, you've had California and New York billionaires, some of them have just been named, support your campaign each time. They've given 6- and 7-figure donations into your IEs. So can you please share with the Denver voters what these donors are going to expect if you win this race?
Yeah, I think that's nothing, because they've not had any conversation with me on what they do expect. I think it's actually very different when you have folks that are civic leaders who care about building solutions to hard problems. They're not developers, or they're not local market people who have businesses before the city and county of Denver. So I think there is no expectation. I've not made any commitment. There's no one that's obligated to me. There are people that back leaders who they think have the capacity to be transformational on hard problems. And so for me, I think people have faith in what Denver can do and how you can get us from a city that has struggled, like many other cities that have struggled, like the San Franciscos or the Portlands or Seattles, who have not been able to turn the tide on things like homelessness and affordable housing and public safety. I think people are looking for leaders in a time when politics is broken to see if they can build those results.
Thank you. Terrence Roberts, do you have a question for Mike Johnston? Or anyone?
Well, now that you mention it, I actually do have a question for, we're just going to pound Mike, y'all. He looks so poundable right now. But I do have a serious question, because me and Mike, we do go really far back, and we did open our office in the Holly. Mm-hmm. There were 88 homicides last year. There were 96 homicides the year before that. Mm-hmm. And in 2020, there were 95 homicides. Mm-hmm. After I was attacked by active blood gang members in the Holly, there's a whole documentary. You're in it, Marshall's in it, Kyle's in it, Leslie's in it for a hot second. You said you didn't need to watch the documentary because you lived it, but me and you, before I had to defend myself, we had an argument because you were not there. A young lady on the documentary even says, "Where is our congressman? Where is our senator?" She was talking about you. You let those Bloods move into our office. I think they're still in there. Gang violence has exponentially risen. Since that day, I had to defend myself. It's at an all-time high right now. Do you think you played a part now by letting active Crenshaw Mafia Bloods move into our office who are wearing red bandanas, organizing in the Holly, doing those things after they publicly attacked me, then slandered me to the Denver Post? They even surrounded me on 9 News.
Terrence Roberts, please let him answer.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Yeah, for those that don't know the context, Terrence and I shared an office together for about 6 years in the Holly. I'm proud of the work that we did there. I mean, you mentioned today the construction that happened in the Holly, the building of the rec center, what is now the African American Health Center. I think you did good work to help mitigate the impact of gangs in that neighborhood. You had a bigger part in that than I did. I was trying to be representative of the people in my district who could walk off the street and into our office and say, "Hey, I can't get a job. What's wrong with workforce training?" I thought it was important to have a community presence in that neighborhood, and that's what I tried to do. And so I do think we have still an increasing public safety challenge in the city, and there's more work to be done. That's why I've come out to say I think we do have to do more in the way of early prevention, in the way of early intervention. A lot of the things that you were doing with young people to keep them from getting into negative peer groups, that's why I was proud to have you there. And so I think there's work to be done, but I feel like that's the kind of work we did together 10 years ago. I'd want to do it again together for the next 10 years, whatever role the two of us are in.
Thank you. Can I? No, we're just going to do one question. We're going to move on. Right. Mike Johnston, do you have a question for yourself?
I'd love to ask myself a question. What makes you so great? Why are you such a great candidate for mayor? No, actually, I have a question for Terrence, which is I do think you have real expertise and wisdom on this issue. You've lived through past waves of violence in the city, and you have a unique perspective on it. I'd be curious what your thought is on what the current moment means and what our best chances to get out of the kind of youth violence we're seeing at really high levels in the city right now.
I mean, so my platform is, I think all violence is connected to poverty. Some violence is connected to patriarchy, mainly domestic violence, these different things, but most youth violence is connected to poverty, which people are not, like we said on Kai's show, are not talking about. And where's most of people's dollars going, especially in Northeast Denver, the 5 Points, Montbello, Green Valley Ranch, it's going to their food costs, their housing costs, fuel costs, getting their kids back and forth to school. We need to make sure that we have more housing democracy in the city. We need to make sure we have more food democracy for food deserts in this city and ways to get people food when there's blizzards and when it's cold outside. We need to make sure youth have more youth activities. We need to make sure that there's more after-school programs, positive youth spaces. And you know I lowered, not just me, I said earlier, my team, we lowered youth violence in Denver for 6 years straight. We lowered homicides for youth gang violence and domestic violence, but attacking poverty with our public safety dollars, that's what's going to lower. The bulk of our violence is youth and gun related in Denver, and we can do better, and that's my plan.
Thank you very much. Al Gardner.
Guess who this question is for? I'm not going to do that to you. This is for Debbie, and I could really ask a number of people on this stage. In support of Proposition 20, City Park Golf Course, and we talk about that a lot. I think it's a consensus around that we need around 50,000 units in the city to be able to support low to middle income housing. And through reading that agreement, the neighborhood agreement portion, we're looking at roughly around 3,000 units, but 10% is set aside, which is around 300 units for low mixed income units. If we're trying to solve something to get 50,000 people that actually need that housing, we're looking at 10% of what the full capacity of that is. Looking at 300, is that enough? And why not go back to the drawing board to come with something more stringent to make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck and more folks housed?
Thank you for that question. First of all, it's 25%. That is what the Community Benefit Agreement calls for on the Park Hill Golf Course.
The UGI is 300, and actually it splits up to 100 for 3 different sections, and it comes up to 300.
Well, that's not what they shared with us when they brought that to City Council for approval to move it to the vote of the people. It was 25%, and that is what we've been told would be recorded if it passes the vote of the people as a covenant on the property. So if Westside decided to sell the land, whoever that next buyer is would have to adhere to those same obligations. So this is a private developer, private property, not city-owned. And we have been able to get more affordable housing in this project than we have even under land owned by the city where we have mandated affordability. So that's part of why I voted to move it to a vote of the people. The voters get to decide whether or not this passes. If it does, then that would be recorded. If it doesn't, it reverts back to a golf course. And there's no guarantee that it will be operated as a golf course. So 155 acres, 100 acres will be open space, 25% affordable housing, a commitment to a grocery store in a food desert that would serve needs for these communities. That's all part of why I think it was important to move that project forward.
Debbie Ortega, thank you. Kelly Brough, your question for someone else.
I could ask anyone this, but I'll ask Al.
Okay.
Al, if you were elected mayor, what keeps you up at night right now when you think about on day one what your greatest concern would be?
Where would I make the most impact and how to discern where to make the impact? Because there's so many balls to juggle. And that's a difficult piece for all of us up here, and I think we're all passionate about that. But that would keep me up at night if I'm focusing on the right thing, and if I'm giving it the right kind of time and energy and money. Yeah. Thank you.
Andy Rougeau, your question for someone.
Question for you, Leslie. So you previously said in the summer of 2020 that you support divestment 100%, that you saw your police accountability bill as the first step towards defunding the police. Will you take accountability, according to the 5280 article, will you take accountability for rising crime in our city and a lack of police officers?
Thank you for the question. I did not speak about divestment of the police. In fact, I talked about how we created STAR in the summer of 2020. STAR is a support team assisted response that law enforcement, activists, abolitionists all came together and said, we need help. We need an alternative to 911 where we have a mental health professional and an EMT respond to calls. I worked with Chief Payson on that measure, and so many community activists and organizers. We saw it work in cahoots out of Eugene, Oregon. Caring for Denver funded that measure, and then we had we had the foresight to launch it in the summer of 2020. Right in downtown. We did not expect what was going on with the Summer of Reckoning, but we did take that tough time and provided services. During that time on STAR, we had 0 negative instances on STAR, period. Now, when it comes to working on police accountability, I'm proud of the work that we did. I'm proud of the work that we did here in Denver. Denverites took to the streets and said, we demand accountability after the murder of George Floyd, after the murder of Elijah McClain. My dad's a law enforcement officer. He worked his way up from a groundskeeper to the head of internal investigations. He's the best man I know. He asked for accountability for his fellow officers as well. The police accountability law was the sweeping bill that ran across the nation. It's the most comprehensive bill to ensure that we're holding police accountable. But we've got so much more work to do. And I want to give hats off to the people on this stage that worked alongside of us to make that happen. That includes Terrence Roberts. That includes Lisa Calderon. And I want to say thank you all for standing in that gap. Some on the streets, most on the streets, and had our back as we fought for real change. It's not the only thing that we need to see happen here when it comes to accountability, but it was an important step, and I'm proud of that work, and I'm proud of Denver.
Thank you. Leslie Herod, your question for someone else up here.
Sure. And so my question is for Mike. But actually, it's just because I heard something just now that I hadn't heard before, and that was really around changing the jails to ensure that there's more mental health pods for those who are on the streets. And we already have mental health pods in our jails right now. In fact, Denver Jail is leading on a lot of issues when it comes to medically assisted treatment, having mental health pods, having substance misuse and detox, and quite frankly, not sure that that's the most therapeutic environment to get people where they need to go. And so for me, my question is this only for the unhoused who are suffering for substance misuse, and how is that not jailing people? If it's in fact in Denver jails, are they going to be able to come and go as they please?
Thanks for the great question. I know this is for people who are facing criminal charges, so people who are facing criminal charges. And when you talk to the sheriffs, I know as you have and I have, what we hear is there's an overrepresentation right now of people who are sitting in our jails for whom their major issues are addiction or mental health services, and they're there and not getting the services they need to actually get healthy. So there are starts, there are exciting things beginning at those jails. I think what we need are more actual mental health professionals, more actual addiction treatment and support that would make those the kind of support people need. So the idea is this is only for a subset of people who are facing criminal charges, but those criminal charges are linked to their addiction or mental health needs, and they could be placed.
That already exists right now in Denver, and in fact, Caring for Denver funds some of those positions, but so does Denver Health, and so does the city, and so that already exists. And so I guess I'm wondering what the difference is.
Yeah, there are some successful early pilots. There's not enough capacity there to meet the amount of need there is in those places, and so there are individual people that are trying to get treatment. What they'll say in the jail is there's far more demand than they have the capacity right now to treat around this mental health and addiction need. So my hope is really to expand that capacity and to provide more of the mental health professionals that do the work that you want them to do.
Thank you both. Debbie Ortega, last question for someone else up here.
So the issues we've been talking about tonight, no doubt, have dominated this mayor's race and have impacted the city. But I want to change the subject, and I want to ask Al a question. So as you know, part of the role of the mayor is also addressing contracts. So what would you do in ensuring fairness in the contracting process?
Yeah, the first thing is two things, and the first thing would be quite easy, and that's ensuring equitable distribution of those contracts, and that's on a couple of levels, adhering to what we're supposed to follow from a city perspective, and then adhering to what we're supposed to follow from a federal perspective, and then taking a look at the women and minority business guide rails that are around how we choose, and ensuring that that is in place, and not choosing it based on association, who we know, or campaign funds. The second thing was making sure that we don't enter into unilateral contracts where the city loses and the contractor or developer wins. My history and my ability to go through contracts I've spent the past 20 plus years, taking a look at contracts, making sure that the corporations that I represent in IT contracts win, and that we don't enter in contracts where we lose, and we look at the full cost-benefit analysis and total cost of ownership before we get into them. So two things, making sure it's equitable. The second thing, making sure that the city of Denver wins and that we choose the right contractor.
All right. Thank you both very much.